Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. So glad you could share your evening with us. We really appreciate your time and your insight and your energy when you listen to all of the wonderful guests that we have on the air. Want to thank Ken Quiethawk for his amazing intro. You can find him and his wife, Deb, on the Internet. Just look for Native Storytellers or Ken Quiethawk, and you'll find him, and you will discover an amazing method of conveying history and cosmology that has come down through time that is really a lost art and a lost gift. There are some out there, but there aren't a lot of them left. So check out Native Storytellers. It's a very amazing way of preserving history. Mark has a great guest on tonight. It's a topic that I'm very interested in. So I have my sleeves rolled up, my paper and pencil ready at the side here, and I'm looking forward to this show. So, Mark, show is all yours.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. How's everything in the Northeast?
This is my Connecticut Hermitage, and it's just fine.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
celebrating my third week of being a hermit.
Okay. Well, hopefully this is going to end quickly and we can get back on with our lives. But anyhow,
Would be very nice.
Yeah. Until then, we're just glad to have people gather around the radio and computer and listen to our shows. And tonight's really big honor to have our guests with us. We've covered the Lost Continent of Mu with Merle Fankhauser. He even went in depth about how Colonel James Churchward's books influenced him to move to Hawaii, create a band named Mu, and write many songs about Mu's history and legacy. We have another show at the end of the month that will be touching upon Mu. So connecting both of those shows is Colonel Churchward's great-grandson, Jack Churchward. How cool is that? Jack grew up in Clear... Yeah. Jack grew up in Clearwater, Florida, is a Navy veteran, has 40 years experience in the aerospace and defense industries, having worked on manned and unmanned space and military platforms. Jack is an engineer and patent holder. He has revised some of Colonel Churchward's publications and authored his own books, and he does his own podcasts and videos on his website, mymu.com. That's my-mu.com. Welcome, Jack. How are you?
Good evening. I'm just fine.
Yeah, been looking forward to this show for 2-3 months now. We're going to be looking at two books tonight, but you have other books you've written, but our primary focus is lifting the veil on the lost continent of Mu, the motherland of men, and crossing the sands of time. So, and both of them are very interesting books on the what should we say, like the fabled land of Mu. But there is evidence, so I don't know. Maybe it's more of a reality, but the listeners are going to find out over the next 2 hours, and they can make up their own minds. But Jack, your great grandfather was born in England, but he got his education about Mu while in India. Okay, can you give us a little biographical information on James? How's he go from England to India?
Well, from the records I've seen, he was a cashier in London when he married my great-grandmother, who had inherited some tea plantations in Sri Lanka, and they moved to Sri Lanka, and they opened up, or he started to work on the tea plantations there. Subsequently, after they left Sri Lanka, and he headed off across the Pacific, and she headed off in the other direction, he waited some years to write some stories in the late 20s about what he said that he found while he was in, he said he was in India, but he was in Sri Lanka that whole time. He said that he was a member of the Bengal Lancers and was involved in famine relief. And as a result, on one sojourn out to visit the different temples, he became interested in the symbols on the side of the temple and developed a friendship with what he called a rishi, and spent some time with him, and the rishi spent some years, according to James' account, teaching him what the various symbols meant. And then eventually, after a while, they became very close, and the rishi brought out some ancient clay tablets from hidden deep in the temple, and he finally confessed that he was a member of the Nakal Brotherhood, and that these tablets had been stored in the temple for the last 10,000 or 15,000 years, and he and his brother were the only ones who were still alive and in the Nakal Brotherhood, and he translated some of the tablets with my great-grandfather, but not all of them. And so from this knowledge that he gained from the translation of the tablets, my great-grandfather wrote the books on the lost continent of Mu, sacred symbols of Mu, forces of Mu, children of Mu, in between 1926 and 1930s, in the early 1930s, yes.
That's.
But that says everything except what Mu was. So the story he told was of this enormous continent in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and how everybody in the world was born there, and from there they spread civilization around the world until 12,000, or sometimes you read 15,000 years ago, the continents sunk all in one day, and everybody perished except for the people that had left Mu and gone on to the other continents.
Yeah, let's not. That's really interesting. Tablets. Barbara and I have this like fascination with the tablet. And you get Alex Chianetti with us about the Tower from the Teos Cave in Ecuador, and Joseph Smith found the tablets at Hill Kumara, and all the Sumerian tablets with cuneiform writing. Get some of the Adena tablets with these hieroglyphs were used to prints on skeletons. Were these Nakal tablets like one of the few written records preserved for, what you said, 10 to 15,000 years from Mu?
That's what my great-grandfather wrote, yes. That the tablets he saw started to tell this creation story and how the different cosmic forces created the world and whatnot.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's fascinating that an outer to the the would be to learn the secrets of the ancient.
Mark seems to be breaking up just a little bit here.
Yes.
You still there, Jack?
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. Now, do you want me on the phone?
Yeah, call in on the phone, Mark. That's much better. Mu has been, for the longest time, one of the most fascinating subjects for me because, theoretically there were just the two main continents, and there was Mu and there was Atlantis, and Mu has always had such a mystery connected to it. The Atlantis one, they got tons of stuff, but the Mu one, it feels much more ancient, and your grandfather seems to have, lucked in on having someone who can translate tablets or whatever. Have you gone back and gone over his records, and do you concur with everything he said?
Absolutely not.
Fantastic. What do you disagree on?
Well, maybe I should start with the stuff I do agree with, and that is that we're all related.
Yeah.
The humankind is all related. But as far as a civilization that went around and spread civilization to all the lesser peoples, I think is not proven through scientific evidence. I don't believe that it's real that somehow some advanced civilization arose and then spread itself out. I think enough evidence has been demonstrated to indicate that most civilizations, or all civilizations, may have been influenced by another one, but not that there was one master civilization.
Don't you kind of think that every civilization that gets to a certain point thinks they are the master civilization and they created everything? And that old adage of the old adage of history belongs to the survivors and stuff like that.
Well, that might be true, but if you look at the different civilizations, how could, for instance, a grain-based civilization in Europe bring their civilization to, for instance, Asia, where they're based on a rice, and it just doesn't. There's not enough evidence. There's no evidence to indicate that there was a master civilization that went out and taught everybody else how to be civilized, which is, in essence, what my great-grandfather wrote about.
Wow.
I mean, it denies those people the opportunity for their own history, for their own accomplishments, and somehow pointing at something in, the dark past that somebody else gave to them, rather than allowing them the opportunity to enjoy the fruits of their ancestors' labors.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree with you. It just always amazes me how so many times you hear the stories about, this master race or that master race or these aliens, gave us this material, and therefore, it does diminish the tenacity that the human spirit has in order to survive anything and to overcome anything, because we do. Sooner or later, we're going to figure it out. Are you back, Mark?
I am here.
Okay.
Hopefully that was just an indication of the severe weather in the area. But,
probably.
Yeah. But Jack, I think before I had to hang up, I was just starting to ask about, with the tablets, your great-grandfather was an outsider coming into this, religious, foreign land, a religious community, and he must have been trusted to work with the rishis to learn how to translate the tablets. What were James's characteristics like? Have you been able to profile him a little bit and see if he was just a very likable gentleman?
Well, there's anecdotal information that indicates that he very much liked women and was very friendly with very many people. He corresponded with lots of people from what I've seen from his letters, and I do have some of those that I've managed to get a hold of. But as far as being a friend of the Rishi, and that's what he wrote. And I have to make clear that I don't really. He was a bank cashier before he went to become a tea planter, and the only record I have of him visiting India was one time that he went to try to pay back a loan, and unfortunately, on his return, he was thrown in jail and eventually escaped across the Pacific Ocean. The stories of the Rishi, I don't believe. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that he waited 60 years to tell anybody about it, didn't write down anything then when he first saw them, had no pictures taken, didn't even try to draw them, and he was, as many people have noted, he was an artist, and he could have written down or copied what he saw on those tablets easily, and he waited 60 years and then wrote books. about them.
Okay, so that was one of the other questions I wanted to get into. Is you do have an extensive appendix. You have revised his books and added more of the where James got his source material and added information at the end of the chapters. But you also have other disagreements with him. For being a family member and heir to his library, you're not automatically siding with everything James wrote. You do have some disagreements. What are a couple of the most prominent aspects of James's writing you disagree with?
I believe I mentioned earlier that the one thing I do believe he said is everybody came from the same. We're all related. We're all one big human family.
Right.
Past that, it pegs out the BS meter sometimes.
Okay.
I mean, for instance, the thought that a master race, which James identified as a bunch of white people, left the continent of Mu and sailed around the world and spread civilization. You got a problem there, in that if everybody came from the lost continent of Mu, why would they need to go and spread civilization to these people that were already from the civilized location?
Okay.
It just, and well, he also goes on and talks about how the Mongols attacked Central America and took over the Mayans, who he says were a white people, and the Mongols came and wiped them out, and that's who's living there now. And the white people built the pyramids, and the Mongols came and took over the white people's stuff, and off they sailed and inhabited Atlantis and went around the world. And I just find that incredible. For instance, how did the Mongols get there? If you look at their history, the 13th and 14th century and beyond, they were a great power. But 10,000 years earlier, I can't see how they made a trip from Asia to Central America. I mean, did they all go through the Bering Strait, or did they all get on boats? And then after that big journey, how did they have enough energy and whatnot to take over another entire civilization? I mean, some of it is just outrageous when you just look at it.
Okay, and in your Sands of Time book, one author called James's writings, let's find the exact quote, escapist literature during the Great Depression. But there's
actually I wrote that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, there it is, right on page 94. It's there could be an element of escapist literature, but there are also some of James's facts that seem to have been proven over the last 90 years, like the Egyptian civilization is based on the Mayans. There was cocaine found in some of the mummies. Cocaine's not grown in, or the coca plant's not grown in Egypt. So was it being shipped across the Atlantic? It seems like James had some outrageous ideas, but they've been proven to be possibly correct.
Okay. I'm not sure that the, for instance, they also found nicotine, but I'm not sure that it was, it could have been a different type of tobacco or something that was not known at the time and has since gone away, or the derivative chemicals that they did for the cocaine testing could have been something from another plant that already existed. I'm not an expert on that on that literature.
No, I forget where I read it.
We just haven't found. Has anybody found their cities? I mean, obviously they would have had to set up some kind of port or something, right? Some structures that would have that they could, ride up and grab whatever they were grabbing from the New World and go back. They'd obviously have to have something there that established something, and I'm not sure that that has been found that indicates a link with Egypt or any of the Levant cultures.
Oh, I think there were ports in Alexandria, but I don't know about ports in Central and South America. It is interesting that you do disagree with James, and so some of those other dates that from like deep antiquity that are mentioned in his book, and you even you paraphrase or not paraphrase cover Edgar Casey's reading that in around 50,000 BC there was a global meeting that happened. Some of those dates are really going way back in time, but there are a couple of these, like the Bosnian Pyramid, if that is real, and when the Sphinx was, after the Sphinx was built, it must have been laying in water because of the horizontal water erosion, and that happened tens of thousands of years ago. There is that little bit of evidence we have today that doesn't make those statements from 90 years ago from either James or Edgar Casey seem it's kind of in the ballpark. Yeah, it does seem a little out there, but there seems to be just a little bit of truth to it. Gunung Padang is another place that has like a 20,000 BC date attached to it. It's just interesting that.
Well, you mentioned Edgar Cayce.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned Edgar Cayce, and
Sure.
the fact that he said that people from Atlantis and the Uyghur Empire, and he lists several people or several peoples in there that all met together to discuss the problem dinosaurs, to discuss the problem of dinosaurs attacking the human settlements. Well, I'm not sure that anybody has found evidence of dinosaurs existing into that recent an age. And if you look at, for instance, my great-grandfather's theories on the Great Uyghur Empire, I endeavored in my book to indicate the sources of his data, which is essentially a newspaper article from a yellow journalism that he found and just changed it a little bit and put it in his books. It has absolutely zero resemblance to the Great Uyghur Empire that was in the 9th century in Central Asia. But his is what they said was his Great Uyghur Empire is 17,000 years old, at the height of their civilization, and was formed 50,000 years earlier. There's no archaeological evidence, scientific evidence of any kind that indicates that happened.
Yeah, that's
in my book Crossing the Sands of Time, I go through the archaeological evidence that we have. If there was an advanced civilization, we would have found it already there, the foundations of their civilization, because it was just released earlier this week. They found evidence of the houses that the people built out of mastodon bones and skins. The little hovels that they made. They found evidence of those, the fact that people were living there. If supposedly the great civilization had built these monuments to their culture and their civilization, we should have also seen those if we can see the small little huts or hovels that they made out of mastodon bones and skin.
It is interesting that you've taken the time to make some corrections to James's works. I could do
well in my book.
Really
I provide his text as it. I didn't modify his texts at all. All I did was add my notes and the appendices and the index. But I'm not scared by allowing the reproduction of his material. If you look at his material and gauge it against what I provided and still believe in James Churchward's theories, then more power to you. But I think I've demonstrated that some of it is off the BS scale.
Okay. And how did you have the name recognition of your great grandfather. What propelled you to want to work with his writings? Like you said, provide an appendix of modern information. Were you always fascinated by his works, or is this something you wanted to do later in life?
Well, when I was a kid, people would ask all the time about it, and I would go to my father and ask him, and he told me it was off the BS scale as well, and not to just, he wouldn't have a book around. He knew my great grandmother. They had stayed in the same house together, very well acquainted, and he knew what my great grandmother thought of my great grandfather, and it was not very highly at all. In fact, I don't even think they mentioned his name ever. And so when I got older and I got the domain churchward.com, and I got inundated with emails asking me questions, and I would answer the questions just like my father would. And eventually I came to the point where, why don't I just look at it and take the time and decide for myself, present the evidence, because I'm just looking at it. I was always told it was a bunch of baloney, but I didn't have any firsthand knowledge. So I started my website and looking into it. Along the way, I've been told many times that just agree with what he wrote and you'll make more money. But I can't buy back my dignity.
Okay, so there was, like, the family had collected all the manuscripts and
oh no,
correspondence.
My family had nothing. My family had nothing to do with him.
So,
the Churchward family went. Well, he married. Well, he married another woman. He said before he divorced my great grandmother, and lived with 3 women at the same time. They were all sisters, and one of them had a child. And he calls him nephew, but I'm not sure that's an accurate description of his relationship with Howard Carasey. And Howard Carasey was the person that received James' books, James' correspondence, and everything from James when he passed away. They lived together in New York, and when at the time of James' passing, he was in Los Angeles trying to recover from, I guess, some respiratory difficulties. And so what I received as far as his scrapbooks and whatnot were purchased by someone at an estate sale, and they provided me the opportunity to buy the books or the scrap books and some of his correspondence, and I jumped up and grabbed it.
Okay. So how does that make you feel now? A little bit more connected to the past, or your heritage, or it's just something you feel needs rectified?
Well, I see that I now know more about my great-grandfather and the life he led, what kind of person he was. I mean, he was a showman, essentially. From his biography that was written by Percy Tate Griffith, he says right in there that originally the story was supposed to be a fictional account. But that when everybody just were clamoring and they enjoyed his lectures and they were reading his books, he jumped over the fence, and it was no longer a fictional story. He was writing it as the truth. Now, I'm not sure that it's my place to correct the whatever he wrote, but it enables me to be able to be consistent and know that, yes, I'm absolutely sure that most of what he wrote pegs the BS meter. And I know that I have information that indicates that. And it's no longer I'm just taking my father's word.
Okay, so let's look at some examples of what James said about Mu. Maybe we can start with the location and a little bit about the height of the culture.
Well, James' ideas about the lost continent of Mu, it's a ripoff of Lemuria. All he did was move Lemuria over into the Pacific Ocean. And also in his autobiography, or not his autobiography, also in his biography, he had the opportunity to meet with Le Plochon on Sunday afternoons, and also probably some people from the Theosophists. The spiritual New Age people met in Percy Tate Griffith's mom's house on Sunday afternoons and discussed these kind of things in the early 1890s and late 1890s. And from that, eventually James came out and wrote his books. So as far as his interaction with other spiritual authors, there is a definite link.
Okay,
in fact,
go ahead, Jack.
Well, in fact, his brother Albert Churchward was a Freemason and prolific author in those subjects. He was also a friend of Le Plochon, and the two of them spent some time together from my reading that I've found. But Le Plochon's work didn't make it into Albert Churchward's books, but it did make it into James' books.
Okay, does the really large population of 64 million people have a symbolic function for the Theosophists?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I just it was in the book. I was just curious, about this census, and there's the 10 tribes, but everyone was united under one government. Is that some kind of connection with the Theosophists too?
Well, I'm sure there's elements of theosophy in some of his works. For instance, the Nicol tablets that nobody ever saw, or just like the Book of Dizan from Madame Blavatsky. I mean, they're tablets that nobody else ever saw. They just popped up, and now they're a record that everybody's supposed to believe. And I at least want to see a copy of at least one of the tablets.
And no one's been able to produce them since in the 90 years since he wrote the books.
Absolutely not. James was a tea planter in Sri Lanka, or then known as Ceylon. He wasn't a Bengal lancer, and he didn't spend 5 years in India learning the ancient Nakal Brotherhood teachings. He was working his tea plantation in Sri Lanka.
And this is becoming fascinating.
Got a question. This
Okay.
is very much. This happens with a lot of science fiction authors, that people become so entranced by what they're writing that they take it as law, and they begin to quote the philosophies within it, verbatim, and they don't ever stop to think about, could this possibly be real? And it seems to have happened throughout all of time. If somebody can weave a good enough tale that entrances you, people think it's the truth, and they don't ever question it reasonably. They just accept it. And the example I can give you, which is my own personal example, and nobody has to agree with me, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but Zecharia Sitchin and his 12th planet stuff, I think, is another one of these cases. And it sounds like your grandfather was very much the same way. He gave society an adventure and a mystery and an excitement that entranced them, and they never stopped to think about, can you prove this? Is there anything that proves it? They just take off and decide to create a whole philosophy based on nothing.
Well, my great-grandfather went one step further, though. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
He went one step further in that he attacked scientists that disagreed with him. Mm-hmm. Almost every page, he would. It's easier to get the truth out of someone than to snatch something out of the jaws of an alligator or something. As I think he said a couple times. It's just that he's not. Telling the story is okay, I guess, even though it's fake and whatnot. It's a story. But when you go and attack, and you attack the real experts, somebody who actually has knowledge about it.
Yeah.
And you don't provide the other side of the story, which is one reason why I include my great-grandfather's material in my books, because I don't want to be accused of providing a one-sided approach to the dissemination of the information. I want everybody to be able to look at his and look at the other side of the story and make up their own minds. I'm not trying to sell any snake oil.
Well, I think you're presenting a good balance. I mean, Blavatsky went into Lemuria and Atlantis in great length, and yet, there's no proof of either of them. And if you sit down and you look reasonably and sensibly at the philosophy that's being handed down in a way, I mean, my goodness, Atlantis was a culture that was, settled by aliens or reptilians or whatever. And I think that the human consciousness loves adventure and loves mystery, and if it's written well enough, and if the story is convincing enough, they will buy it. Kincaid's Cave in the Grand Canyon.
Arizona.
Arizona, yeah. I mean, nobody has seen this stuff, but there was a news report, and it fascinated so many people. There actually is a group that really believes it's there, and I don't know if it's there or not, but it's a great story. And I think what you've done is really good, and I would like to see other people do that to other of some of these fables. I don't want to destroy people's imaginations, but I want them to understand that you do have to question, you do have to see proof. You can't accept stuff, just on someone else's say-so who has a twinkle in their eye and is a great storyteller. I mean, there's enough weird stuff out there already without making it up. I mean, there is strange stuff out there that you can't explain, but there are witnesses and there is evidence. And I think he was probably. I have the book. I'm sorry to say I have not read it yet, but it does feel to me as though what you're doing is of great service to people, because you're giving them the story, you're giving them the legend, and you're also saying consider this before you decide to take off and become a follower. I think that's a great thing.
We try harder.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Okay, we're talking about the evidence. James covers the Moai statues on Easter Island. It seems like an advanced civilization had to be there to engineer getting those statues in place and sculpting them.
But you can go on the internet today and see YouTube videos of megalithic cultures that still exist today and move enormous stone blocks from one place to another. After quarrying them, they move them and build things. You can see videos today of how they did it. Mm-hmm. When people say, no, we can't do that today, I'm sorry, they just didn't look hard enough. I understand that they don't want that information or data to be available to disprove whatever their pet theory is, but it's out there. There's an individual in, I believe, Wisconsin who moved a pole barn 200 yards. Either he did it by himself or he asked his son-in-law or his son to help him, and they moved a pole barn 200 yards by themselves.
And Coral Castle was built the same way. Secret technology done by a petite man.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
But he knew what he was doing.
So, when we look at the artwork that James produced, the lotus flower, it seems like it's in a lot of the literature, artwork as well. Did he just interpret that to what he wanted it to be? Is he basing that on anything he saw?
Which artwork are we talking about?
With the lotus flower, the sun.
Well, the lotus flower is a Buddhism. If you look, most of the Buddhas are on a lotus flower, mm-hmm. and all the lotus flower is unique in that it grows out of the muck and comes up out of the water, and it's pure. It's pure white, or whichever color the lotus flower is. So it's symbolic of a spiritual awakening, or spiritual cleansing. As far as what he wanted to think it was, I mean, if you look at what he thought were ancient items, for instance, belonging to the Great Uyghur Empire, most of those are Buddhist items. For instance, the dorje, he calls it a scepter of power. It's a Mahayana religious item that goes along with the bell, and you can see it on tankas, religious paintings. So his interpretation might have fit his story quite well, but it has nothing to do with reality.
Okay, and there's also the seven-headed serpent. The artwork that he has in his book is eye-catching.
I know that maybe some of that came from his discussions with his Theosophist friends, or he discovered it in his reading. A lot of what he had came straight from Le Plongeon, Dr. Augustus Le Plongeon. You can pull it straight out of his book, and it's in James, almost word for word.
And we've had a guest on talking about Le Plongeon. He is like one of those French elitist types in the 19th century. Is that right?
He was a doctor.
Yeah, he had some. Barbara, do you remember him from Jason's The Giants book?
I don't think so. I all I know is what I keep hearing here is that he feels as though he was very much like P.T. Barnum. Create a circus and make money on it type stuff. It doesn't feel like
it helped during the Depression.
Well, I'm sure it did. And I understand people saying to you, just keep the fable going, but that would be hard today, because people today are, I think, while they're still fooled and they still like to believe in stuff like this, they are more intense as far as checking things out. I know that he feels to me as though he was not the kind of man you could get close to, but the kind of man that would use you if he could. So, the scoundrel, sort of.
I would come to that idea as well. In some instances of
his behavior.
Yeah.
I've seen people like this before, and I think that what you're doing is a good service. It's probably getting his work out there again, and yet you're cautioning people, be careful. This isn't quite the truth, but it is a good story to tell around the fireside.
It also makes some people very, very, very angry.
Really? Why?
Oh, absolutely. I've received those emails telling me what a nasty person I am. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How dare I?
Yeah, how dare you try to put truth out there alongside, fiction? And all they have to do is prove it, and you'll back up.
Absolutely.
But, I got that. And so when, if I get a how dare you letter or whatever, I call right back to the person and say, prove me wrong, please, because if I'm wrong, I want to correct everything that I've done. And they usually just stutter and go away. Because, I'm open. I'm not always right, but I'm never wrong. So, it's that kind of a thing. You have to, I think what you're doing is great. I think the book that you've put together is beautiful, and I think you have preserved his fiction. You've preserved his stories, and that's what they are. They're great stories, and he obviously did some research, and he did a little bit lifting here and lifting there and weaving it together, and he obviously made some money on it, which at the time was really important to him. But
yes, it was.
There are scoundrels like that out there that have convinced the public that they know so much more than they do, and it's up to the general public to question and look into it. And if they don't have the time to investigate it and prove it wrong, you're doing them a great favor in doing that. But it
I
is
just have
kind
to
of
be honest.
Yeah. At the same time, I think that you probably have a story to tell as well, and I'm not sure just putting the facts out there. It feels to me as though your philosophy is worth a book as well.
Oh, well, I'm not sure many people would read it, but.
Well, when he wrote his stuff initially, he didn't think many people would read it, and it sounds as though, as it gathered momentum, he got carried away by it. And quite often, when the truth is out there, people usually, it's what do they say? An artist is never recognized in his own time. Putting your philosophy out there alongside his is it's fun and it's interesting, but it seems to me that there's great worth in what you have to say as well. I mean, we are one people. We do come from a single source. We have developed independently. We have different cosmologies. Which is what makes this Earth such a fascinating place, because there are so many different ideas as to where we came from, and nobody knows what's true.
But it's still true that we're all related, that we're all one human race.
It is called the family of man for a reason. Well, it should be men and women, but we are. It's not just men; it's women too. But we are.
I understand.
A family. We are a family. I'm not really a feminist. It just occurred to me that, I'm talking to a whole bunch of men here, but we are a family and a diverse family, and it's. Like any family, there are relatives you love and there are relatives you don't like, and there are relatives that you think are crazy, and they probably think you're nuts too. So, I mean, we are that kind of a family. We have a little bit of everything in us. And I think our creative stories, and that's what just about every culture has, our stories, because there's no book that says... We didn't come with an owner's manual, unfortunately. So we've made our own owner's manual up, and some of it is quite profoundly ridiculous, but it serves its purpose. It gives us a platform to grow from, I guess. But I don't believe I believe there was a continent where Mu was supposed to be, but I think Blavatsky was crazier than all get out, but she wrote a lot, and people take it as almost a Bible. Her books. They make great bookends. But so there are a lot of people out there, and I think every generation has to have their own. I don't want to call it prophets, but their own truth sayers who put the truth out there, and the truth really floats a lot better than a lot of the other stuff does, but it takes time. But I love what you've done. I just think you've got your own stuff out there, and you've done so much research. You've got a great foundation to talk about your own truth. So are you writing a book?
I have yet to start the next one, but I think it's going to be probably a little bit along the lines of human rights. For instance, one reason I did write Crossing the Sands of Time to set the record straight about the Great Uyghur Empire, because there is so much of the. I've known the Uyghur people and friends with the Uyghur people now since for over 20 years. And when somebody came to me and showed me what my great-grandfather had written and how starkly it's different than the actual true history, that it motivated me to write the book and to try to set the record straight. And it's also true that I know it's not an exhaustive history, but it's a short history of the Great Uyghur Empire and how the Uyghur people developed and how they really do not deserve to be under China's Communist Party's thumb right now. In the last 2 years, even our State Department, 3 million people in concentration camps. Somebody has to do something to help change the situation. Not only that, but what we saw happen in Hong Kong, how the people of Taiwan are being neglected because the World Health Organization refuses to acknowledge Taiwan as an independent state. China demands that the world, they demand everybody treat Taiwan as a province, but the truth is they're not. They're an independent nation. I know somebody's going to be upset with me about this, but
no, you're right. But human rights is a great topic because every country in the world is denying human rights in so many different ways. I mean, look at our Constitution. We didn't acknowledge that blacks were even worth a whole person at one point in time. So
3/5 of a person.
Yeah.
Yes, but right now they have. That's old news, though. We've gone beyond that. I mean, that's seriously. That happened in the past, and to even think that something like that could exist in this country today is ridiculous.
But it does. Look at the homeless people.
Wasn't our last
Look at all of
president?
the homeless people. Yeah.
And a lot of those homeless people do it by their own choice.
Yeah, they do. They do, but they have rights as well. And
Absolutely,
you look
they have
around.
rights.
You look around the world, and there is an elitist society, and they don't care about anybody else. And you wonder what humanity is coming to when we aren't remembering that we're a family. When we are, I'm better than youing it to certain people. It's very strange times that we're coming into, and I think a book on human rights and on women's rights. You're right, it's in the past. Women didn't get a vote, but we still don't get paid as much as men do. And in many cases, we're better than they are. So, it is time that our society started to recognize the worth of everyone. I taught special education for 25 years, and how my students were treated when they were out in society outraged me horribly. They were bullied, they were made fun of, they were, it was horrible. And society as a whole has forgotten what compassion is, I think. Unless
I don't think everybody has. I do agree that there are some really nasty people out there, but they have freedom of speech, right?
Everybody does. But so there is that element of human rights, and it does need to be addressed, absolutely. But how do you go about doing it? Because almost everywhere you look, you can find some way that humanity is not being treated compassionately.
Well, it is my belief that the United States is the best system available. Everybody has the same rights, where there's no, unfortunately, there are some egalitarian, elite people who believe that they should stay in political office for for decades, and they're the only ones who know everything. But if they could, they would. I just think that once we get rid of those folks...
I think one of the Supreme Court judges is actually dead, and they just stuffed her and sat her in the chair.
I've heard that. But fantastic claims need fantastic proof. So.
Yeah, that's true. But I think we've got the beginnings of it here. But how do you, for instance, change the term length when they have to vote on it and they don't want to vote themselves out of a job?
We have to do it.
So we have to vote out the people that don't want it. Yeah.
Put on
we have to vote out.
Yeah, that's going to be. It's going to take a little longer, but I think you're absolutely right, and I think what you've got to say is very important. And while your grandfather stuff is fascinating, what you're crusading for is even better.
And Jack, and you even have the example that basically James's American fairy tales inspired cultural revolution in Turkey. And there's something that came, a positive outcome that came from BS.
Well, yes, Ataturk used, from my research, that Ataturk used the connection that Maya Tepic, his ambassador to Mexico, found in my great-grandfather's books. It allowed him to create a secular Turkey and get away from the religion that had burdened the caliphate for so many centuries and kept everything under, a religious rule.
Say right there on page 89, James Churchward's account of the great Uyghur Empire also helped fuel political change. Even though we've been learning that his writings are very fanciful, there was something positive that came out of them, and what we've talked briefly about, and it's on your some of your social media pages as well. You've gotten involved in a lot of humanitarian activities as well. You're talking about the 25 years that you've been involved with one group. What differences are you seeing being made as it's just President Trump did have meetings with the North Korea leader. At least some talking has improved some situations in that area. I'm just throwing that out as an example. Maybe something improved communications are going to happen worldwide as this virus hopefully winds down very quickly. What are some new directions that are happening in human rights?
Well, China just got assigned to the Human Rights Commission for the United Nations.
Sounds like a contradiction.
I'm sorry, it's funny.
No, it's not funny. It's not funny to the individuals that are being persecuted.
Oh, no, it
the
doesn't.
churches that are being destroyed every day. The
how
mosques
could we do that?
that are being demolished. We didn't do it. They paid off somebody to do it, just like they paid off let me not say they just like they influenced the World Health Organization to say that there was no problem with their coronavirus and all the lies that they've told.
So do you think that are like days of Tiananmen Square coming to an end, or do you think that the human spirit can overcome the oppressors and everyone can be the way they were meant to be?
Well, they're wiping out an entire culture. I mean, they're wiping out the Uyghur culture. For thousands of years, they've inhabited their lands, and now they're being thrown in prison camps, in concentration camps. Not only that, they're sending them to do forced labor as slaves in other parts of China. The people that couldn't go to work, they're grabbing them. They're grabbing my Uyghur friends and pulling them out of the concentration camps and sending them to the factories instead of the regular people who worked in the factories during the virus. They're tearing down all the churches. They're destroying graveyards and cemeteries. They're tearing down the mosques. They're tearing down monasteries and temples. And they lied to us. They lied to us. They lied to the world to tell them that the coronavirus, the Chinese Communist Party virus, started in the United States, brought it to them, and we're the originators of it. I mean, I don't know what we can believe from them, but this is getting way off topic. But I mean, I think in the future we have to address the fact that they're not in it to help people. They're in it for themselves. They don't care if the rest of the world dies.
That's true, and yet there are no voices out there saying that. They're unfortunately, people point out that they have control over so much that is good for that this country needs, not that's good for us, but that this country needs, that we have to in some way have a relationship with them. I don't think we need to, but that's just my opinion. It is to the point where we rely upon them so much, it's ridiculous. Thanks very much. I'd rather pay more for my gas, but the gas prices that we are now self-dependent there. But for some reason, made in China, was so much cheaper than made in America that everybody thought, let's go cheap. Well, you get what you pay for.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, the powers that be, whoever they are, seem to have made choices for us. And like you said before, we have to shift and change those who are making the choices so that they understand who they represent. A couple of years ago, I fired everybody in the government on Facebook, and I thought I'd get all sorts of hate mail, and nobody paid any attention to me. I mean, the letter basically said, you're forgetting who you're working for. I tell you what I want. I send you off to the magic land, and suddenly you forget who you're working for and who's paying your salary, and you decide to go into business for yourself, and you forget the people that you represent. So, and I thought people would, really let me have it. Nobody said anything. It was kind of like, that's scary. I couldn't get a rise out of anyone.
I mean, it's difficult to imagine someone who's never held a job or started a company or anything, and they've been in public service. They call it public service their whole life, and they're millionaires.
Amazing.
Or have 3 houses. And nobody. I don't understand why nobody finds that disgraceful.
Well, and people. Patrick, my late husband, figured it out once that of the time people serve when they're in office in Washington, that over half their time is spent raising money for their next campaign instead of taking care of business. So we created, the system somehow. We've got to change it.
Well, I'm not against people making money. I think that if somebody has an idea and they work hard, that they should be rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
But being in public service and making millions and having a large bank account, several houses, and all that doesn't inspire confidence. And at least it doesn't inspire my confidence in their abilities to actually think about the people they're supposed to be representing.
I would love for somebody in power to know what it's like to have to live check to check, or or to choose between food and medication, or they don't understand. And when they did that insurance thing, they weren't using the same plan we were. They had their own special plan for medicine. Now, if you're going to pass a bill, it should apply to you too. It just seems fair.
Concur.
So I think that we're in for. I do not think that life will ever be the same again, and I'm really hopeful that we've all learned something from all of this, and we can grow from it and make the changes that we need to make, because we sure as heck need to make changes.
I'm on the same page.
Time will tell.
Jack, do you? I don't know what the right word is. Since you said you were getting emails, from Asia, friends in Asia, are you? like becoming a correspondent. It's almost like you're an ambassador for American ideals reaching other people.
Cool.
No, that's just the impression.
I'm just one person.
One person can make a difference. Just from what you
tsunami
said.
Start as a ripple, so.
Yeah. But that's fine that we've moved away from the fairy tale. Like you said, we got a little off subject, but maybe we needed to have a discussion like this to inspire people to hopefully stop this elitism that has been going on for way too long, and it's not working for the people. I think with the situation going on now with the plague, we need to have this talk.
Well, I believe that we need to reassess our interactions with the People's Republic of China, controlled by the Chinese Communist Party.
Just a good start.
Well, and also get them to pay for what they've done to us and the rest of the world. They owe it to us.
So, what have you been hearing from some of the people, from China? Or is the situation with the virus far worse than what's been reported? Is there something else that we don't know about?
I am not in communication with anyone in China.
Okay, well,
just to be clear,
Uyghur people, like the Uyghur people, have they been impacted by this virus?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been pulled out of concentration camps to fulfill the workers' roles in other parts of China. You can see pictures on social media of a Chinese factory with all Turkic Muslims sitting in the seats.
Have you heard anything about how that flattening the curve there is going? Is it still going up, or is it leveling off some?
When you hear news that the crematoriums in Wuhan have been operating 24 hours a day, some people are saying on social media that they're now incinerating them even before they die. They're just putting them in a body bag and throwing them in. I realize that's a bit harsh, and I'd have to see proof before I would believe something like that. But I'm not sure there's a single thing we can believe from the Chinese government. After all, they tried to blame it on the United States Army. They tried to say we're the ones that did it, They lied to us about whether or not it was infectious, coupled with the 430,000 Chinese people that have come to the U.S. in the last 3 months. You just begin to wonder. We really need to reassess our position with China. They're not helping, especially when they threaten us.
Okay, so what else can America do? So, getting into a actual fighting war doesn't help. It stop buying products, stop supporting the boycott the children in the sweatshops and that kind of thing.
That should have already been happening. The people in charge here in the United States who knew that was going on, they should go to jail if they knew that child labor or slave labor was being used to create their goods that they were making money off of and becoming rich off the suffering of others. Is they need to be in jail. I'm sorry, I'm a bit off the topic.
No, that's
and
okay.
a bit...
But when you stop to think about it, it's very much like the concentration camps in World War II. Even the towns that were there ignored the fact that there was a concentration camp there. They turned a blind eye to it because they didn't want to get involved or were being sent to one too.
Or be shot, yeah.
Yeah, so you have, a huge population at risk, and there's, I'm not going to say there's no way to do it, but it's a very delicate matter, and without getting into a war.
But my employer forbids me to say, my employer who is not identified has told me I'm not allowed to say boycott China and Chinese goods.
Oh, well,
but
then
since
you
they're
should
not
never
identified,
say. Well, no, you should not say that. Then you should not say boycott Chinese goods because that would be wrong. But
absolutely,
I could say it. Boycott Chinese goods. Yeah.
but in addition to the Uyghur, they're wiping out their language. They're not allowed to speak their native tongue. Their graveyards are being bulldozed. Their mosques are being torn down. Their neighborhoods are being torn down, and new Chinese style buildings are being built. And it's just not...
They're being erased.
It's not erased, but it's just not the Uyghur. It's that they're the Kazakh, Kyrgyz. You also have the Mongolians that in southern Mongolia, who have, they have centuries of their own history and culture that is being erased. And you look at Tibet, that is being destroyed, the destruction of the monasteries, their reincarnate lamas have to be selected by the Chinese Communist Party, who are avowed atheists. And I can't be the only person that sees something wrong with that.
Well,
Go ahead,
I'm sorry,
Barbara.
Mark, go ahead. No,
the Dalai Lama has been in exile for 60 years or 70 years or more.
Since 1959.
Okay.
He was once asked who was the person that influenced his spiritual development the most, and he said, without a hesitation, it was those that chased us out of Tibet. And they looked at him and said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "They taught me forgiveness, love, compassion, and patience." Now, if everybody could respond that way, something good might happen, but I don't think that's going to happen. There aren't a lot like him around.
Well, I'm not advocating a shooting war. I'm not advocating us attacking or being belligerent at all. The Chinese people, when they wake up, as they did in Tiananmen Square or in Hong Kong, there'll be a reckoning.
I think you're right. I think it's got to come from within their country, but certainly we can help that along by not supporting their country. So, there's a lot. I think all of us have to really wake up to a great degree. And so many people of us have been so apathetic and not paid attention to what was going on until suddenly everything got messed up, and we had to stop and take a good look at where we were, how we were living our life, and how we were impacting other people's lives as well. So I'm horrified at the amount of death that has gone on. It breaks my heart. But at the same time, it gives everyone a chance to reevaluate their own understanding as to how they're living their life and what they're doing and how they're affecting other people. And by having to spend so much time together, oftentimes without, the electronics being babysitters, it gives us a chance to learn to communicate, to learn to function as a unit, a family unit together. So in that way, this has been a good experience. I'm horrified that it took this kind of a thing for it to happen, but I'm really glad that it is happening, that people are becoming more communicative. I know that since this has happened, I've talked to a lot of people that I haven't talked to in a very long time, just checking and making sure they're okay. And you're reestablishing a network of communication that hasn't been there. There's something about, a sentence that doesn't even have words in it, just emojis, that is not saying I love you to someone. Picking up the phone and talking to them does, though. So I think we've all learned, I hope we've all learned a lot from this. I know I certainly have benefited greatly from it, but, maybe in time we'll find that this has not been a wasted effort, that those who have passed away did it for a good reason. It's very much like 9/11. Those people that died, of course, a war did start, but we learned a lot from it all. So it's just, I'm so sick of hearing about deaths and everything on the news. It's just awful. I digress.
Well, one wonders why they don't talk about the people who recovered. That they focus on the death and the new cases, and they don't talk about the people who recovered.
Well, you've got a very good point, because there are a lot.
Right,
So,
and why are they pushing? Why are they pushing the negativity?
Because fear sells.
I understand we.
Fear sells.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make people fearful, and you get their attention. Unfortunately.
Well, Jack, a lot of what you said is just very reminiscent of 1984, and I'm sure most of the audience is aware of that novel, but I just hope that there'll be some Winston Smiths that will emerge from this and make this world a better place. Before they put the rat cage on your head.
Mm-hmm.
And there, I've been dealing with, a few people who have been doing living room concerts because they can't, they don't have an audience, paying audience, but there are a lot of people who have become very creative with social media to still have a presence, connect with an audience, and I'm sure they're hoping to sell a few CDs, but with social media, it is possible to keep connecting with other like-minded people to bring change. That's another positive aspect from this national lockdown is the creative ways people are using social media. Like even this show became something else, which is fine, but I'm glad we've been able to use the Nightlight Forum to talk about positive ways to change the world.
Well, I'm all for that.
So, and Jack, we have just under 20 minutes left. What are some things you're working on with your my-moo.com website? You have those really interesting lectures and videos you have on the website.
Right, those are I've got a YouTube channel too. I've been focusing more on my blog and providing people send me things trying to prove that Moo existed, or they send me emails, and I'm not against them sending me this information, but it provides me the opportunity to be able to look at the other side, to examine what they're saying, but just go a little bit further to see what they're not, whatever they sent me didn't say. I mean, for instance, I keep talking about the Uyghur Empire. If James didn't say any of the truth about the Great Uyghur Empire, but if he had, you would have known immediately that his version was wrong. And so sometimes when you get these emails and the suggestion that, for instance, Percy Tate Griffith's daughter, I was in correspondence with her, and she was also writing and picked up a piece about these columns that were found off the coast of Peru. Now, I wrote a recent blog article about it, a posting. And the fact is that it was 1967 that they saw these, and at first they started the coverage of it about this little tiny sea creature that they were finding deep in the ocean depths. I guess that didn't cause enough furor or hoopla, so they started mentioning about the supposed columns with weird writing on them that they saw at the bottom 6,000 feet under the ocean surface. Well, after this many years, you would think that if there was something to it, somebody would have gone and actually done something to either prove or disprove. But I imagine that if they had gone and disproved it, that it would not have had the coverage of if there did find columns with ancient writing on them, with actual evidence. So essentially, that's the direction I'm going with My-Mu, to look at the various proofs that people think are a proof, and just tell the truth about it. Provide both sides of the story and let people make up their own minds.
Okay. So, do you think you're going to be doing these, new research for a long time? Are you in it for the long run?
I'm going to do it occasionally. I have some other projects I have in mind that I'm going to be pursuing. But yes, I'll be doing an occasional blog posting from here once in a while. As stuff comes up, as more information becomes available to me. Like I said, I do appreciate it when people do send me materials, and it provides me the opportunity to examine it and put it in proper context.
Okay. I think both of your books. I enjoy reading both your books, and you have also the Stones of Mu that wasn't on the agenda, and be glad to cover that another time. But are those stones connected to the Nicole tablets, or is that just a completely different topic?
Well, the book is the Stone Tablets of Mu, and essentially it covered a book that more of a brochure that my great-grandfather wrote in 1927. It was called Copies of Stone Tablets Found by William Niven at Santiago, Oaxaca, near Mexico City. And William Niven did find 2,600 tablets in Mexico City. The veracity of some of the tablets has been questioned. For instance, in some places they're identified as having been created out of very tough granite or other really tough materials, rocks. And I was actually interacted with one of his great-grandsons, and he sent me one. And essentially, it's pumice, something that I could pick up off the ground. I could pick up a piece of pumice off the ground and make this tablet with a kitchen knife or a pen, just scraping it out. And it has been suggested by Dr. Jeb Card of the University of Miami in Ohio, who has examined quite a few of these, and it's covered in his book, I guess, Spooky Archaeology, that many of these might be just something that somebody found in their yard or said they found in their yard and handed to William Niven, or that his digs were seeded prior to his arrival. And so The veracity of some of the tablets is in question. But James did use the discovery of these tablets. I mean, they weren't in his 1926 book, Lost Continent of Mu, Motherland of Men. He only showed 4 of the tablets, and only 2 of them were interpreted. His 1931 book, Lost Continent of Mu, Motherland, no, it was just the Lost Continent of Mu. He included 69 references to Niven's tablets. And all of a sudden, everything turned to the Niven tablets were part of the Nakal Brotherhood, the repository of the Nakal Brotherhood. And he was the only person that could decipher them.
Okay, so that goes back to, you just mentioned Dr. Card from the University of Miami in Ohio, and you have a lengthy video with him, and he does, in that hour-long discussion, there was a section where he talks about how to spot a hoaxer, and he mentions maybe they just have one video on a YouTube channel, or they're the only ones that have seen the artifact. It sounds like he's describing James as well.
Yes. And Madame Blavatsky, and I can name off other people, but I don't want the nasty emails.
But there's William. You just mentioned William Niven during his Mexico explorations, and just was outside of Mexico City, and he supposedly found all this stuff. And he was friends with James. So what was? Were they
no
working
evidence
in
to indicate.
tandem? Oh, I thought they were.
I have no evidence. I have no evidence that they ever met each other. I do have evidence that they corresponded.
Okay.
As far as the discovery of the tablets happened before James and Niven interacted, communicated, or anything. So as far as the tablets being manufactured for James, that didn't happen. And I would never say that Mr. Niven was aware of being hoaxed. I'm not sure he would not have gone. I don't believe he would have gone ahead looking at his entire life and the way he lived his life. I don't believe that he would have sanctioned hoaxing people.
Okay, so they were just correspondents and were just explaining. William was explaining what he was discovering during his digs. Was that how the relationship?
Well,
formed?
after they were found, he interacted with James. And James picked up one of his newspaper articles that was written by William Niven, and included it as a chapter in lifting the veil on the lost continent of Mu and the lost continent of Mu. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. That's the lost continent of Mu, motherland of men, and the lost continent of Mu, the 26 and the 31 books. And so after Mr. Niven had read what James included in his book, they started a correspondence. So all the tablets had already been found, but James appeared to be the only individual who was able to decipher them, other than one gentleman in the British Islands.
Did he,
in the UK?
Okay. Did the British gentleman arrive at the same translation, or were they completely different?
Negative. I believe he said that the figure was related to the Jupiter, the god of it was Jupiter, and different things to go with a different mythology.
Okay. This crazy stuff, and we're down to about two minutes. This has been a fascinating discussion, straightening out a lot of misconceptions and myths and fables, and maybe there is some information in there. I had an idea about the Kennewick man, but we can save that for another time. But Jack, as we start winding down the show, do you have anything you want to websites you want to plug? Hopefully, you have some upcoming appearances later this summer. Do you have any? Here's some time for you to plug whatever you want to discuss.
Well, my website is my-mu.com, or you can find me at jack.churchward.com. And I don't get invited to many interviews anymore because they usually ask me up front what my thought is, what my thinking about my great-grandfather is, and as soon as they hear that it doesn't match their opinion, I am disinvited. Or the invitation never gets sent. So I'm very thankful that I'm able to say something in this forum. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack. It was an enlightening show. Appreciate it. And Barbara, you want to wrap up things?
Sure.
If there's
will.
one thing I'd like to.
Whoops.
Go ahead.
Whoops. Sorry, Jack.
If there's
Go
one
ahead.
thing I'd like to say, my great-grandfather thought that we're all the same family. So please treat everybody as you would wish to be treated. And thank you again.
Thank you, and those are great parting words. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm sure that you're reeling with some of this information, and that's appropriate. This is meant to make you think, and hopefully you will. And the show will be up on YouTube tomorrow before noon. Thanks for joining us. We so appreciate your time. Good night now.